Hey, do you ever feel like you're drowning? Do you feel the pressure from others and yourself and feel overwhelmed? Are you worried?
Paul gives us some really good answers to these things, and as a child and youth care counselor, we should listen to him.
Hey, welcome to the Bible Story Podcast. My name is John. This is my dapper-looking friend, Braden, and we're just so pleased to be here with you today.
Dapper, thank you so much.
You are welcome.
I did not dress accordingly to the weather.
No.
It's minus 30 outside, and this hat doesn't cover my ears, so
It's not quite the Canadian classic winter
No.
toque.
Form over function
Yes.
on this one. But we are still very excited to be here with you guys, and although it is cold outside, our energy is still up.
Hey, if you came and joined us this weekend at the challenge, so glad that you came. It was so much fun to connect with you and hang out. It was an awesome weekend.
Yeah, we really enjoyed it. If you guys are still looking for chances to connect, remember that there is a connection group or conversation group online virtually, so you can meet us from wherever you are. And we've been kind of building that into some of the stuff we've been doing and using this podcast as a jumping off point. It's been really good.
Yeah. And if you want to start your own,
Yes.
you could. And you just reach out to us. We'll give you some tips and tricks and how you could do that and build a community in your area. Okay, so we've been going through Philippians chapter 4.
Yes.
We're in chapter 4 right now. And it would actually be a good idea if you read today's passage, which is Philippians 4, verses 2 through 9. So you could hit pause, read that. This text, this whole book is actually a thank you letter from Paul to the Philippian church. And so take a read through that. And in this text, we've got some pretty important things. There's a sense of Paul's relational closeness, or his friendship, I think is what the correct term is called, with the people in Philippi.
Yeah, he is writing this letter, or these letters, like this letter, as an encouragement to them. And we recognize in this chapter, there's actually two females that are at conflict with one another. And he kind of steps in and talks with them and processes through this point of saying, like, you can't fight against each other. You can't be against each other. We need to be a community together, and in this as strong as we can be.
Yeah. And there's some ideas of just some of the hardship that they are experiencing as a community. They live in Philippi and they are experiencing some persecution. And so they don't know a lot of the things. A lot of the things for them are unknown. The impact on their income, for example, would be significant. And they'd also find that their physical well-being is in jeopardy at times. And so a lot of anxiety would come about because of all of those things.
Yeah, I think Paul does a good job of kind of recognizing that it's not, they're fighting with each other, but because of other things. There's a lot of outside pressures, and maybe you guys have felt that yourself. Like if we look at, your life every day, you look at school or work or homework or friends or grades or any of the things, even extracurricular stuff, things that you enjoy. Sometimes those can boil down into us feeling anxious or the need to perform a certain way. And then we can lash out at other people, even if there's really no connection with our stressor and the person themselves.
Yeah. And so Paul's advice leads to this idea of peace, which is so cool. Now, Braden, we've got healthy ways of coping with the things that are difficult, and we've got some unhealthy ways.
Yes.
And I think the healthy ways, obviously, they're good for us. They benefit us, but they also, one unique thing as followers of Christ, they bring us closer to God.
Yeah, a healthy coping mechanism, as we would call it, or coping skill, is one of those things that we say what we're coping with is the pressure, right? And so when we do that in a constructive way, it builds us up. It gives us confidence. It builds our relationship with God. And then there's things that we cope with in unhealthy ways, and those are things that we need to turn away from. And actually, Paul suggests some really awesome things in the text today that kind of guide us through some of those unhealthy versus healthy coping skills.
And maybe those ladies are experiencing some enough pressure that
Mhm.
their conflict is actually as a result of some of the outside pressures and not necessarily fully with each other.
Yeah. So Paul breaks it down into two kind of separate sections. So he talks about this very immediate need for resolution or this immediate need for peace versus this kind of like prolonged or steady approach to it.
Yeah.
So when things come in or come at us and it's a heavy or quick emotional response, that's the immediate. Right. So there's someone angry in front of you, or you've hurt a friend, or, you're in a situation that there's all these emotions and you need to make sure that, things are safe around you. And that's an immediate reaction. And what Paul says here is, if it bothers you, then tell God. And John, I go back to something that you said a long time ago, and it's this idea that inner voice is our communication with God. It's actually, Paul reminds us to step into the presence of God and and tell him about those things, and then ask him what we need from those points. And so it's this idea that we're recognizing the immediate emotion of the time, and then we're in the presence of God and we're saying, okay, God, this is what I need. And a lot of that is just our inner voice. It doesn't have to look as prayerful as maybe we would think that it does. It's not a silent moment or closing our eyes necessarily. Sometimes we could be walking down the hallway or driving a car or, in a room full of people. But again, it's that kind of inner voice, inner monologue that can very much be prayerful.
I like that. So we tell God what we need, what we actually need. And there's two things that come about from this. One is that we have to trust God. If we're asking him to provide for our needs, what we feel like we need, then we have to trust him. The second thing that comes out of this, telling God what we need, is that we step out of our own presence or our own emotional state of being and into God's presence, which is far more stable than my presence.
Yeah.
And we can really be anchored in that.
And Paul continues on, he kind of rounds out this idea from, this anxiety to peace, is a really important step, which is to thank God for what he's done. There may be moments when that is very difficult or challenging, or maybe you can hardly think of anything to be thankful for, but it's a really important step that we allow ourselves to be thankful for what God has done, even if that's a really small thing that we can come up with or think of, be genuinely grateful for. It helps shift our perspective.
Yeah. And one of the things that I've learned in some reading, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, but
I will.
Gratitude actually helps rewire our brains into a healthier way.
Yeah, it's a really important stepping stone.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Which kind of brings us to our next point into the day-to-day. So we've kind of addressed the immediate need of our anxiety and our worry. But we don't want to live there. We don't want to kind of come up and down, up and down. We want to be in God's presence always.
Yeah. So how I like to think of this is again, that reactionary versus proactive, or reactive and proactive. So we talked about the reactionary, which is it hits you in the moment and you deal with it. And the proactive is actually saying, how do I live in God's presence all of the time? How do I experience more of God's peace before the anxiety creeps in, before the worry hits me, before maybe all of the thoughts start to kind of snowball into something bigger?
Where God's peace and his rest is our home base.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. So I think there's this idea that we can reflect on the good things, right? And so I'm gonna look. I've got my Bible here. Let me read to you what Paul says in chapter 4, verse 7. Verse 8. And he says, "Finally, brothers, whatever is true, whatever is noble, whatever is right, whatever is pure, whatever is lovely, whatever is admirable, anything excellent, if anything is excellent or praiseworthy, think about such things." So he just makes a big long list. If it's good, think about it. Let that begin to change and transform you.
Yeah. focus on that. And so to make this applicable maybe to the everyday scenario, let's think about it like this. So again, the reactive or proactive kind of two-way street here. So the reactive is, maybe you're at school or sports something, or at your job, and you start to feel really anxious and you need to react to those emotions. So what Paul is then encouraging us to do is to make sure that we're safe, first of all, in a safe environment, and engage with those emotions in a way that allows us to name them. Am I feeling sad? Am I angry? Am I frustrated? Am I annoyed? Am I happy? Am I joyful? All of those things. Take stock of what you're feeling, as opposed to maybe just the anxiety or the worry that's being caused by the emotion.
Yeah.
And then think to yourself, what do you need in that moment? So after, naming the emotion, what do you need in that moment? Think to yourself, maybe you need a person to talk to. Maybe you need someone to start a conversation and ask you how you're doing, because it's too hard to start that conversation. Maybe you need a quiet space or to listen to your favorite song, whatever that is. And then Paul really encourages us to let God know those things, to actually ask God those really specific needs that we have figured out, and to step into the presence of God and really allow him to help us work through that.
That's really cool. So, okay, so you've kind of addressed one scenario over here. Let's address the second scenario over here, where it's not necessarily an immediate thing, but it is something where we want to kind of change the way we think and the way we feel, even day to day.
Okay, so the proactive
scenario.
So, which means like setting yourself up for success.
So maybe let me throw a scenario out.
Okay.
A teenager comes home. They finished up school. They grab a snack from the kitchen. They go to their bedroom just to kind of hang out and have some downtime before their next thing. It's kind of this transition time between what was to what's next.
Right. Whether it's off to sports or supper or chores, whatever.
Yep.
Okay. I really like that scenario. Transition times are really important. It allows us to kind of redirect or refocus on what we hope to be focused on. And so, as Paul mentions here, to just step into the presence of God, to acknowledge the presence of God, which I think is really good. And again, just in that inner monologue and inner conversation with yourself, to say like, hey, God, thank you for today. Thank you for anything that you can be grateful for. And then if you did have a difficult or challenging situation and you asked God for maybe peace or joy or a conversation with someone, reflect on that and say, is that still what I need from that situation? Is that still what I need based on how I am feeling right now? Right? Maybe what you need is a nap or a good meal or, again, someone to talk to or some alone time, all of those things, and just ask God once again, very specifically for those things. But you're kind of re-looking at maybe the scenarios of the day.
I like that. That's really good. Growth tip time. Growth tip time. All right, let's get into our growth tip.
All right, so Paul has mentioned, and we've talked about a lot of emotions today. We've the good, the bad, and the ugly, if you will. So speak to the whole picture of it. Like, what do we do with all of that? There's a lot going on.
Yeah, I think that there is this idea that negative emotions are bad.
Right.
And positive emotions are good.
Yeah. Or maybe even easy and hard emotions.
Easy and hard emotions, or this one's not good for me, this one is.
Right.
And the idea is that God has made all emotions for our benefit. Now, in the moment, we might struggle to find why is anger that I'm feeling right now a benefit to me?
Right.
Like, it might be a real struggle.
Yeah. It might not feel like it really at all until much later.
Mm-hmm. But these are emotions are things that we've been given by God to help make sense of our world and our experience.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so here's here's what I want us to do in our growth tip.
Okay.
Imagine you're driving down a street and you come to a stop sign and you get to go in any of the 4 directions. You get to go back, forward, left, or right. Okay, so you get to go in whichever direction you want to go. Now, here's the scenario. Use your emotion as a stop sign and decide what you're going to do and choose to go right to God.
I like that. So anytime we feel an emotion, good, bad, ugly, confused, whatever that emotion might be, use that as an indication to stop.
Yeah.
And then to choose the direction of God.
Yes.
To direct ourselves towards God, which is really important. We are not saying that the emotion that you feel whenever it comes up is wrong, but we do have control over the direction that we head after that point.
Yeah. What we do with that emotion might be wrong or it might be really positive.
Yeah. That's great.
All right. So I think in summary, this growth tip, stop.
Drop and roll.
No. We're not on fire. We're not on fire. Stop, tell God, and thank God.
That's awesome. I really appreciate that. Even though it's, not stop, drop, and roll, but stop, tell, and thank.
Unless you are on fire, then stop, drop, and roll.
Do that first.
And then proceed with the next step.
Okay. But before we go any further, thank you guys so much for joining us today. It is always a pleasure to be here and share a little bit about us and connect with you guys. Again, if you're looking for more connection points, head to covenantbay.ca. Their virtual faith group is there, or follow us on Instagram at Bible Story Pod, and we will continue to do our best to give you guys times and spaces to connect.
Guys, we love you. There's nothing more important than a growing relationship with Jesus Christ. Till next week, have a good one. Hey, we're going to jump into the discussion. Questions for the episode. Advice on your anxiety.
So in Philippians chapter 4, verses 2-9, Paul gives us some really good outlines of what we can do with the anxiety or concerns that we feel. First, we tell God what we need specifically. So we got to check in with ourselves, what we're feeling, and then we got to figure out what we need, and we ask God for those things. Second, we thank God for anything that we can be grateful for God's presence, for his guidance. And then third, we reflect on the good things. We reflect on the good that God brings to us.
That's awesome. Okay, let's get into our questions.
Okay, sounds good. So here is a challenging one, and this whole process might be a little bit difficult, but question number 1 is this. I want you to name 3 emotions that you felt today. So 3 separate emotions that you felt at some point throughout the day. Hit pause and discuss.
Okay, question 2. Think about how you reacted to those emotions today. How did that reaction impact your relationship with God? Hit pause and discuss.
And our third and final question, what do you need from God right now? So think of your emotions, think of how you're feeling. What do you need from God right now? Practice asking for what you need. Hit pause and share. Thank you all so much for sharing and talking. We understand that it's not always easy to be vulnerable with yourself or with others or with God. And so it all comes with practice.
Hey, be sure to pray with each other and maybe take some time to thank God within your group.
Yeah.
I think that would be a great time. I think that would be a really good practice. Okay, guys, till next week, you guys have a great week. And we are praying for you, and we sure love you.